I pushed it, it didn't go on. All right, do you want me to start over? All right, good morning. We do have a quorum. We have 4 of the 5 of us now present. I'm Julie Pierce, Chair of the Admin and Projects Committee for CCTA. We will call our meeting to order. First item on the agenda is public comment, where we invite members of the public to comment on any item not listed on today's agenda that pertains to CCTA. Is there anyone who wishes to make such comment? Seeing no one, we will close the public comment period. And before I go to the rest of the agenda, I just wanted to make an announcement, and it's bittersweet. Susan, who has been with us for a very, very long time, 20 plus years, has announced her retirement. And I want to offer Randy a chance to make any comment as well.
I just want to say congratulations on making the decision to retire after 21 years at CCTA. It's been, you've worked on a lot of great projects, the Caldecott, State Route 4 West, State Route 4 East, and all the other projects that Mayor Taylor really loves, and those in between. And we've made a lot of great progress. You set the stage now for the projects that you've been working on, and make sure the handoff is very clean. So thank you very much for your focus on delivering the projects. Unfortunately, we haven't closed a lot of the projects out that we worked on in the past, but we're working on that as well. So from a staff level perspective, enjoyed working with you, and thank you very much for your commitment and your focus on delivering the projects for our county. It's been really important. So promises made, promises kept. You kept your promises. Now you can retire with your head held high. So thank you very much.
I would just add to that Susan Miller has been here and worked on Highway 4, I think, her entire career with CCTA. And so we really appreciate your efforts and all you have done for us. But we also know that you've got some grandbabies that are calling to have a little more of Grandma's time. So we are wishing you all the best. Anybody else want to make comment? Newell?
Oh, I will.
Okay.
Before his Highway 4,
Okay.
Susan, it's just, you've had such a great impact on this agency with your personality, your tenacity, and just the way you approach things. You're not like all these other goofy engineers. You are really focus-driven, project-driven, and I just really want to say personally thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
Bob?
Well, we probably will put a sign up in Brentwood if it wasn't for. Yeah, I thought about this last night. I was trying to say, how do I enclose Highway 4, et cetera? So I thought, if it wasn't for Susan Miller, we might not be here. But I thought that was pretty cool.
It's pretty cute.
Anyway, I just want to thank you because obviously the impact you've had on Far East County is probably, well, it wouldn't have happened. And you increased the population a lot. But, that's the good and the bad. But again, I do appreciate it. And I hope you're going to go do something. Stay off the road. Do something that you find challenging and interesting, and spend some valuable time, because this is a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and you got to deal with who you deal with, and sometimes you don't sleep well at nights. So True. Now you need to just go home and tell everybody, shove it, I'm retired. So that's how it's supposed to work, and I thank you.
Yeah. Safety improvements on both ends of Highway 4 probably would not have happened without Susan's tenacity. Susan, you want to say anything?
Just briefly, this was actually a really difficult decision for me because I love working on the projects. It's personally extremely rewarding to be able to work on a project for that long a length of time and then figure out the funding and then actually deliver the project. So it's very rewarding, and I've so enjoyed working with this board. They've just been wonderful. and the atmosphere and the staff. It's just a wonderful place to work. So it was a difficult decision. My husband retired last year, so I see how much fun he's having. I do have a grandson and hope to have more grandchildren. So I've got plans for the future. And again, thank you all so much for making this such an enjoyable profession for me. I've really, really loved every minute. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. All right, now we have to get back to business. So the next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. Any changes, corrections, or a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Arnrich, second by Butt. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. Next item is the consent calendar. Anything anyone wishes to pull?
Just a quick question.
Okay.
Brian, I didn't see anything that updates our favorite investment tool.
It's there.
Did I?
25 or 27 million is the value of the swap. Is that it?
What I was looking for was for the, given the interest rates are moving, and since it's moved down, which is what drives us to have a higher negative value, I didn't see what that value was.
So I can tell you that in regards to the swap value, originally it was a $40 million threshold.
Right.
The $40 million threshold is still there. When we refinanced the bonds and did the bonds of August of 2018, we paid off $100 million and paid $13 million on there. But the outstanding $100 million principal at the time when we sold the bonds still had a $17 million price tag on it. And what's happened since the lowering of the interest rates, it's gone up to it's about $27 million when I checked a couple days ago. So as we look into the future, we put in an extra call date in next fiscal year. If we wanted to remarket early, if interest rates were going to continue to go high and pay off, it seems like they're going in the opposite direction. But we don't have to do anything next year. We can push it one more year and see where we are in the economy the following year. But that's something that we actively look at. Randy asks about it all the time.
Good.
So
Thank you.
it's an unconventional investment tool that we've used, and we're trying to bring it to more conventional, and we're always going to look for an opportunity to change that. Since we're talking about interest rates, I'm going to go just a little bit longer. We have the interim financial report in here, and you can see that we have $6.9 million of interest income.
Yeah.
On that, we had investments in the rising interest rate environment. Ending fiscal year 2018, we were at a negative on our investments, probably about $1.7 million. But because we had changed our investments and we have a short investment terms of like about 3 years, we bought higher investments as things were maturing. And then so when we ended the fiscal year, when interest rates were starting to lower again, we had a $3.5 million swing. So, that's not real money until the investments mature and different things like that. So
I always feel better when you speak. Thank you, Brian.
Can you add the 2020 call? Maybe just talk briefly about that. So we're looking at calling some of the bonds today.
Yeah, so the way we've structured our bonds is we're trying to look at the potential call dates. We also have the swap that we need to remarket next year or the following year, and then we have the LIBOR rate that's going away. So we're trying to structure all of these to save money. We can do some taxable bonds now, refinancing, but that's a little confusing and a little extra work. So we're going to wait a little bit to see where it all falls into the perfect place. So I do work with our investment team and on the bond side to ensure that we kind of review things every month, every other month, and kind of see where we are, and we're continuing to look forward.
You give us great confidence, and thank you. With that, I'd move the consent calendar.
Have a motion by Arnrich, a second by Taylor. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. We are on to regular agenda items, and that first one is legislative update. Lindsay, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, good morning. I'll just give you a very brief update on the federal side before Mark Watts jumps into what's happening on the state side. Transportation has not been the most top of mind issue in Washington lately. There have been some other items that have consumed some attention and media and time of the different committees. But stuff is still happening. And a few things that we are watching is last week the FTA announced a new Mobility for All program with some funding. And it's going to be a series of grant opportunities over the next few months that are really focused on funding innovative strategies for older adults, individuals with disabilities, and low-income communities. So we think that we have a couple of projects that would really be good contenders for that sort of funding. So our advocates are watching that really closely. They're also working on preparing our work platform for 2020. So that's something we're hoping to be able to bring back to you in December. There's a few things they're looking at. There are still rumors that earmarks could be coming back, so they want to be prepared for that in case that window opens, that we've got a good list of candidate projects. So internally, we've started to work on that as well, and really just gearing up for the reauthorization of the transportation bill. So with that, Mark, I'll let you give your update.
Any questions on the federal side? Okay, Mark?
Good morning. I'm happy to be here today. I'll say one thing. This interim session is not like ones in years past. It's very busy. As a lobbyist, used to got to loaf during the fall, but no longer. But in the last couple of weeks, I had a couple of things I want to point out to you, then give you a couple of updates. I had the opportunity last week to spend an hour with the new Caltrans director, Tokes Omishakan, as well as the newly appointed Chief Deputy, Jim Davis. And it was very, very a good, cordial first meeting. He's got a lot of expertise in the active transportation world, as you know, but he's quickly learning, and with having Jim Davis at his side, he's got good guidance for the internal management aspects of Caltrans. So I look forward to working with him. I think he had been on board for 6 days, and he was pretty familiar with some of the things I actually spoke about, so it was very good. I would point out that the governor did make appointments at the very end of CTC, and I can't remember if we covered this at my presentation in October. I don't think so. There's 2 appointments for the commission from LA. One is Tamika Butler, who is like the new director. She's got good expertise in active transportation. The other is a very active funding advocate out of LA. Her name is Hillary Norton, and she administered a fundraising and advocacy organization called Faster LA. So we look forward to working with her. In addition, there is one remaining vacancy because Commissioner Gilmetti has been appointed to the High Speed Rail Commission, so he's no longer on. So we're interested to see who that may be. And because of the 2 LA appointments, I'm thinking the Bay Area may want to weigh in with somebody to recommend. I don't know how that would work, but it's an idea. I haven't talked to anybody about it yet. And finally, I note that Lucy Dunn and Christine Kehoe, 2 commissioners, are on the commission for 1 more year, so there's 2 more vacancies coming up. So it's going to be a lot of changes on the commission in a short order. Separate and apart from that information, I think I did mention the executive order that the governor issued at the very end of as well at the very end of September, which became somewhat controversial. It directed state government entities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by any way possible and to mitigate the effects of climate change. With respect to Caltrans, they directed them, and they used a number which caused a lot of people to flinch. The executive order said leverage the $5 billion of the annual revenues that are attributable to Caltrans. And immediately, anybody who was involved in transportation outside of the governor's staff thought that $5 billion had to do with SB1. Clarification was it didn't. It was just a fair share in their mind of what would be an appropriate number. So we're waiting to see how the director and the chief deputy put together a game plan with the secretary to look for ways to leverage. One way that appeared to be a potential was the shakeup when the State Department of Transportation introduced its new ITIP as part of the STIP process. As you recall, the ITIP receives 25% of the STIP money, and the STIP money was stabilized in SB1. It didn't get new money, but it was stabilized because before it went up and down according to the price of gasoline. No longer does that happen. But the 25%, when you updated for cost increases and other items, the amount left over for Caltrans was a pittance. And so they tried to find funding that they could then allow the new administration to have some say over. The way they approached it made some sense, but it frightened a lot of people. The approach was they found 3 projects that had been programmed in the ITIP for design or environmental only, but no construction money. So since they had received that portion of the money, they decided to defund or deprogram out of the program and then free up the imputed available capacity to a new reserve for rail. So the way that got translated in the media and in the Central Valley was they trashed 3 highway projects of great importance on 99 and 46 and set the money aside, not spend it, set the money aside for some airy-fairy new rail project somewhere in the state. That's how it got translated. I'm not saying that's my view of it because we spent a lot of time working with them after they released it. And it was, somewhat of a disappointing rollout, I think, is the problem they had there. We, in fact, the transportation industry is submitting a letter asking them to find resources to restore those projects, whether it be ITIP or some other source. So we'll see how that plays out. And adding further fuel to the fire that there's a lot of gamesmanship afoot, the Senator Bell's bill, SB 277, dealing with the local partnership program, was vetoed. And that veto, so the veto of the bill means that they have allowed the commission to continue to work ahead with their own guideline process and their own perspective on how to split the money between formula versus other allocations. And that factors in because they've had some workshops where they're still promoting kind of a disproportionate share so they have more control over the funding. And I think you have before you today a letter on this issue that I think is well suited and timely to be submitted. The industry in general has submitted a letter, and I think the letter from your organization and other like entities will help potentially put the brakes on where they're going. Maybe not go as far as they want, as you would like, but I think if you don't speak up, you won't have an opportunity to really make an influence. So with that, I draw my presentation to a close, other than to note I'm excited to see that you have the Iron Horse Trail overcrossing, and I feel a tiny bit of ownership because of the assignment you gave me to get the bill passed. So I'm going to hang around and watch that.
Wonderful, wonderful questions. Randy, you want to follow up?
So we have a letter in front of you, and it's I can sign it or we can have the board chair sign it, but it reminds the commission that we're looking for an 85-15. We acquiesced from 95.5 to 85-15, and then we don't want to have to fill out the paperwork every single year. Why don't you make it a multi-year allocation? We know what the money's going to be. It's going to be by formula, and we would be happy to tell the commission where we're going to place the dollars, but for us to have to go through that, we're a staff of 20, and the amount of paperwork that SB1 requires, we're going to have to hire 2 more people to do all the paperwork. And so that's in that letter. It's a pretty simple letter. It's longer than maybe it should be, but it's 85-15, and then don't make us fill out the paperwork on a yearly basis, making a multi-year allocation. We'd be happy with that. So that's in front of you.
I just wanted to jump in to say they did ask for comments by this Friday, which is why we're bringing this to APC as an action item.
Well, personally, I think we need to send it. And whether it's more appropriate, you're sending it to the deputy director, so probably fine to have Randy sign this. I mean, it maintains the policy that we've had, that we've talked about at other meetings, and since it hasn't gone to the full board for approval, I think it's probably more appropriate that Randy send it as staff to staff, don't you? For protocol's sake. Yeah, like today. That would be wonderful. Okay, any other questions of?
Thanks. Question, is that an action item that we do that?
Yes. So
Okay,
It's
just-
not actually on the agenda, so we've got to add it to the agenda? Or actually, if it's staff to staff, Randy gets to do it. We don't need a motion.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let me just, so
It's
all we're
staff
doing
to
is put in
staff.
front
We
of
don't
you,
need it.
just want to
It's
Get your,
consistent with
you know,
our policy. It's fine.
Yeah, so
Send
we
her
haven't
out.
changed anything. We just want to formalize it, get it in
Yeah.
before Friday.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then I
Okay.
wanted to add one thing. So one of the things that we have talked about over a series of presentations that we do, talking about our mobility program, is accessibility. And that's what Lindsay briefly mentioned about Secretary Chow. She's talking about how do we provide transportation for all people. And so we were invited again to a invitation-only roundtable in Washington to talk about how we are approaching accessibility. So Peter Engel's not here, but he attended for us and talked about our program trying to provide accessibility to the underserved portions. And so they funded our application for our automated driving system program, which includes trying to get the absentee rate down at the county hospital, trying to provide mobility for senior citizens, the elderly. And so I think we're on the right track with the direction that Secretary Chow and the administration's headed toward accessibility. But I just wanted to mention that once again, we were a small organization on the West Coast in the middle of the Bay Area. They could have chosen anybody else to represent local agencies, but we went and we tried to provide as much information as we could.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. If there are no other questions of Mark, we'll let him sit and listen to the presentation on Bollinger Canyon and Iron Horse Trail. I think Ivan is doing this one. Yes? Ivan, do you want to take this as three separate items? Do you want to give the whole presentation, then we vote on the three separate items?
I'm going to go through the presentation, and then we'll go one by one approving each
Perfect.
of the items, if you don't mind. Thank you. Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Ivan Ramirez, and I am the Director of Construction. And today we're going to ask you to approve the use of the construction manager general contractor delivery process for the Iron Horse Trail. This is a project that is in the regional trail system, and it's going to be over Bollinger Canyon in the city of San Ramon. This is a project that the city of San Ramon has asked the authority to help deliver because they feel that they have limited abilities and abilities to deliver, so they think that the authority is better prepared. This is something that Randy, I believe, at some point discussed with their city manager, and eventually they, a couple of months ago, the board approved a co-op agreement between CCTA and the city of San Ramon to deliver this project. So I'm gonna give a brief presentation about the project. In the background is the rendering of the bridge, as is the city envisions it being constructed. The cost right now is $21 million. I must say that there is a shortfall right now of about $6 million. The city is applying for several grants, including the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and perhaps other sources of funds. And they might not be able to gap the $6 million or fill that gap of $6 million by getting grants, but they have agreed that they're going to pay for the full amount. Whatever the shortfall is, the city is going to find a way to fund it so it's completed. Again, the sponsor is the city of San Ramon, and the project delivery method is CMGC. So a little bit about cable stay bridges. You know, I've been in construction a long time, and I never built one. And there's coming. It seems like there more and more of them are being built, but the technology has been around a long time, since 1836. Right there is a picture of the Brooklyn Bridge, and I think the Brooklyn Bridge is known as a suspension bridge because you can see the big cables on top and the suspended ropes coming down. But there's also a cable stay component. These are coming out towards us, so you can see them coming at an angle. And that's another way in which the deck is supported. In this instance, both suspension and cable stays are being used. So there's a big benefit to the use of CMGC. One of them is time savings. On the tab where you have the typical design, build, you first do the design. Then, of course, you go through the advertisement and award process, and then it goes to construction. And one of the things that we're trying to eliminate here is when there's this transition from design to construction, there's a lot of uncertainty regarding cost. So a lot of projects basically blow up at this stage because obviously the engineer's estimate is lower than what the construction bid amount is, and that creates some funding issues. There's two methods that are used to try to keep that uncertainty at bay. One is design build, which was contemplated for the Iron Horse Trail, and that gives the ability to control some of the design and some of the construction costs, and also to save some time. The problem with design build is that you turn over the design to the contractor. You bring the contractor on board, you hire the contractor, and they hire the designer. So at some point, the owner loses control of the design, and that is something that a lot of times is not optimal, depending on the project. With the CMGC, which is at the bottom in orange, you actually begin the design, and you bring the contractor on board, and he begins to help the designer eliminate risk, perhaps bring innovation so that costs can be minimized, and means and methods that they might use can be incorporated into design, and so on. So there's a lot of interaction between the designer and a construction contractor that, first and foremost, again, saves times, and then perhaps the goal being that you control costs. So here's a organizational chart of how the CMGC works. The owner, in this case that will be CCTA, will hire a independent cost estimator, and what they do is they evaluate the design consultant's engineer's estimate, and they also evaluate and validate the contractor's estimate. So in essence, there's three different estimates that are being looked at and hopefully resolved so that everybody agrees what the cost is. And the three of them are working for the owner, so they're complete control by the owner of what the decisions need to be made. And of course, so the process works. Let me step back a little bit. We hire the designer and the independent cost estimator, and that's what we're going to ask here in a minute for you guys to approve the request for proposals. And subsequent to that, the construction is brought in. The construction contractor finishes the design, and there becomes a point in which you're at the 90%, 95% design, and then you ask the contractor, the CMGC that is hired, to submit a cost proposal. Again, with the assistance of the independent cost estimator and the design consultant, the owner tries to see if they can come to an agreement. If there's an agreement, then as phase two is given to the contractor so that they can actually go and do the work. If there is no agreement, then the way the RFP is written for the contractor is that at our discretion, CCTA's discretion, we will put the package out to bid. So then, and that contractor that worked during the design phase is excluded from competing so that they don't have an advantage. So to summarize some of the benefits of CMGC, there is increased design control because, again, you're getting that feedback from the independent cost estimator. You're getting that feedback from the contractor. You're able to adjust and design a better product. You have more reliable cost management because, again, if there is a design feature that the contractor thinks is going to cost too much, then you might be able to eliminate that feature or make it smaller, or whatever the change might need to be made, it's going to be made at the design phase. There is innovation and collaboration that happens. Randy and I are big advocates of collaboration, and that's what we do. Partnering, it's a little different because when we do partnering, basically, the marriage has already happened. You already have a low bid. You don't get to pick the low bidder. We're forced to work with the low bidder. In this method, hopefully, we'll get to pick who we want to work with. We reduce risk, and we also streamline the project schedule. So with that, before I ask you to approve Resolution 1959P, I'm open to any questions regarding the CMGC process.
Questions, Tom?
Can you go back to the slide that has the timelines on it? Yeah, right there. So, looking at the first one, design, bid, build, shouldn't there be a piece in there for an RFP for a designer? You show it under CMGC, but you don't show it under design, bid, build. In other
Yes.
words, that would
The-
make
the-
it even longer,
There,
right?
there should be an RFP.
Huh?
There should be one. Yes.
Okay.
So
And
that
then-
would make it longer.
Yeah, but the second question I have is, I don't understand how you can cut the design time by 2/3 going from design, bid, build to CMGC. I mean, design is design. It's going to be done by a third-party engineer. So why would it take any less time to design it than it would under design, bid, build?
So, so that's a very good question. For the Iron Horse Trail project, perhaps this is a little bit of scale. But if you think about a multi-million-dollar project, $300 million project, the CMGC process allows for what they call work packages. So let's say the design for a bridge is completed. Let's say it's an open field project. The design for that bridge is completed. You can begin to build that bridge while the remaining bridges along that alignment are not completed yet. So it really depends on the project what that overlap is going to be. It can be significant and it can be zero. So we at Iron Horse Trail, we think that we can get some early construction. But it depends. The other thing that happens here that perhaps is not as descriptive is that there's some procurement. You might be able to do some early procurement of materials that you don't have to do when you wait, that you have to do at a later time when you have the design build model, right? You cannot tell the contractor, hey, go get these whatever towers that you might need or whatever may be the case.
So this would be the first time CCTA's done a project like this?
Yeah, yes, there's a little bit of history with this CMGC, and Mark Watts has updated us over the last few months. It was originally approved by Congress in 2012 when they used federal funds. The California legislation has piecemeal CMGC, depending whether it's a specific project, a specific agency, and they all cannot be in the state highway system unless it's being done by Caltrans on their special legislation also. So AB 1475 was signed in September 12, 2019, and it becomes effective January 1st, 2020, and that's the legislation that allows CCTA to be able to use the CMGC delivery process. But we cannot use it on the state highway system, so the typical construction contract that the authority normally does, with like 684 or the Express Lanes project, we wouldn't be able to use it there because we're not authorized.
Randy?
Well, I would just say that, I'm skeptical. I understand the potential time-saving advantages with design build, and I understand the potential opportunities to avoid overruns, by having the contractor and the designer work closely together from the beginning. I just don't see how you're going to cut all this time out by doing this. I mean, I'm skeptical. I'm willing to give it a try, but I just don't see it.
So as Ivan was saying, this is it's approved by Federal Highway Administration. So design, build, and CMGC were approved under SEP 14 or SEP 15 process for the Federal Highway Administration as a procurement. So Mark, how many pilot projects did Caltrans were authorized? 10? And so we can look at the time savings of those projects. There is time savings associated with those 10 projects. And so what we're trying to do is show that you can do it on a local basis on more complex projects. So that design time is the same for design build as it is for your construction because it takes so long to design. But you overlap the construction piece and you save time in construction. And you might even save time in design because you're going to work closer with that contractor. And if you have issues with traffic handling, if you have issues with design, the contractor will help you during that process, say, we can't build it the way you're designing it. And so ultimately, there is some time savings. Now, I'm not sure if it's that big in the green, but the point is, this process is more cost certainty, and there's going to be savings of time because you're not going to have all these disputes later on. You schedule certain times.
Bob?
I'm probably going to ask some very amateur questions. But I learn an awful lot on being on this board. There's bridge engineers and there's engineers. And sometimes bridge engineers think they're better than normal engineers. I've heard that quite a bit since I've been here because I thought engineers were all engineers. So with San Ramon, and this Iron Horse Trail has been going on for a long time. And my question is, I got 3 questions. The first one would be, for this type of construction, San Ramon is very prone to earthquakes. In fact, I think one day it'll disappear. But the idea is that is this going to be really taken into effect on, i.e., the earthquake type setup? Because I'm sure it's going to. Maybe it's a little different, I would presume. That's a terrible word, and I should never use it. The second question is, since one of our first times out on this, would this have a normal contingency hold? Would it be 10%, 20%, in case of an override on this type of deal? And then I guess the third question, what is the power of CCTA as far as oversight? And
So
I'm
yes.
sure some of these are very simple answers, but not. I would just like them explained.
So number one, regarding the earthquake design question, every structure in California has to be designed to a certain earthquake resistant standard. And normally the way, at least in the day when I used to design with these things, it was a brief moment in time, a long time ago. It depends.
Are you bridge or engineer?
So I've done mainly structures in my career, primarily, but I've done also some roadway work as well. So the earthquake design, if you're closer to an active fault zone, then the seismic forces that the earthquake must resist has to be stronger. So everything has to be designed to earthquake levels, but it depends on the proximity to certain faults. So does that answer your question? So in this bridge in particular, I'm not familiar with the fault here, so I guess the Hayward fault might be the dominant fault here, and then will have to be designed to resist an earthquake for that kind of fault. Second question is the idea is to have a smaller contingency when it goes to construction, because hopefully a lot of these issues that might come up are already resolved and baked into the design before it goes out to construction. But it will have a contingency for sure. It's just it will be smaller. The third question.
Let me interrupt on that. Let me get a little bit of clearance there. So if the contingency is smaller, but if it takes longer or something, I'd like to make sure we have enough contingency, as this is our first outing.
Yes, we have to be, and this relates to the last question you asked. We're working very closely with the city. You ask about the power that we have, and we have the power because we are the ones that are administering the contract, and we are going to be directly dealing with the contractor, the designer, and the cost estimator. However, the way the co-op is written and the way that staff has approached how this project is moving forward is to engage the city every step of the way. So, anything can happen in construction, but we believe that this delivery method is going to eliminate a lot of risks whereby the contingency will be smaller. The project will be fully funded according to our agreement with the city.
Okay, other questions? Newell and then Tom?
First of all, those were great questions. I think we all thought we knew the answer, but it's good to hear them out loud and know that really is the first venture, but I've been involved in a lot of design build projects. 100, nothing over 100 million, but the outcomes of design build are not always what you think you're going to get, because when you start that process, the final product is a lot of it's out of your control, because you've set parameters and stuff and you've given up. I actually like this, and certainly it's different, and I have not personally worked on any of these. I've seen and heard of these process. The sort of hatched area between design and construction, that's the variable. I mean, it isn't like design stops there. That design bar actually goes all the way through, because it's very different than the design build. Design build gets separated. Everybody reviews it. Did it meet our spec? Doesn't look like it. But so I think this is a much more collaborative approach, and it's the collaboration that I think that will save time. I wouldn't do it necessarily just because it's going to save time, except time is money, right? I mean, the single biggest cost in building highways and roads and projects is the length of time. And it's because of the amount of labor for traffic control, which can be 40% of a project sometimes. And I think in this case, that's a long span. I mean, it's a long span. That's a project that's iconic. It doesn't need to look like that. It doesn't need to cost $21 million, to be honest. But that's what the city of San Ramon wants. It's just like the Bay Bridge. The cost of resisting the forces, the way they built that bridge, is probably double if you had done a conventional suspension bridge, and it probably would have been a third the cost if you just continued those concrete precast structures, and it would have been done years ahead of time. But it was a desire. So City of San Ramon, in this case, this is their gateway. They really want this to stand out from the whole valley, and it's a big deal. So I get it. I think given that, this is probably the best formula to get to that. Willing to obviously see. And to be honest, our agency's not at risk. We don't have any risk in this. It's the City of San Ramon, and as Hyven said, you're going to keep them informed that they're going to be part of those decisions. It's their money. We're facilitating being paid to oversee this, and I think I think on this project, because it's so finite, I think there's a good one to do it on.
Tom?
Well, for the reasons that Newell gave, there's no compelling reason for us not to go this direction. I just want to go on record as saying that I'm skeptical about all of the potential time savings. I mean, the construction of the project is going to take what it's going to take, and to speculate that you can cut it in half by this process, I'm very skeptical of that. Same way with design. You can cut design by 2/3, and I understand there's a potential overlap there, but part of this process also is that if you get to the end of design and you don't have the price that you think is fair, then you got to go to bid. And so now, instead of looking like this, it's going to look like that. I mean, I'd just be interested to see what happens. But again, I'm just skeptical. There's no such thing as a free lunch. It takes so long to build something, and it's very, very difficult to cut that in half or cut it by a third.
Randy?
I don't typically argue, and I'm not arguing in this case. I'm just going to add something to that. So 684 interchange was first scheduled at 700 working days. Is that correct? And what they're trying to do is they're trying to build those two bridges in 2 seasons, not 3, correct? And so this is after we award. So in order to accelerate from 3 years to 2, we have to pay. Now, the idea here is during design, when the contractor says, I think I can build that in 2 years, not in 3 years. So they bake that into the design of the schedule. So that's where some of the savings occurs. You don't have to pay for that during construction. You pay for that, and you incorporate that into the design as what Ivan just kind of briefly mentioned, means and methods. That's what the contractor is going to come back to you under that first design bid build. That's the tool that we use now. But in order to accelerate, we have to write a change order, which Mayor Taylor, Commissioner Taylor didn't really like initially. So we have to pay for that during construction. So that's the idea, is time savings, is maybe we can incorporate some of those ideas that a contractor has to accelerate a cable stage structure. And you'll save time, and in theory, you're going to save some money.
Can I offer a couple of comments?
Go ahead, Ivan.
Commissioner, but I think your comment is well taken here. You know, that's going to vary. The graphic that is shown there is not something that I didn't mean to promote that it's going to save or it's going to overlap
It's
that much.
representative, not exact.
So exactly. So in that aspect, the point is well taken. The second thing is that when this legislation was authorized for Caltrans use, I think they authorized 10 projects. I guess Mark what's left already. And what Caltrans had to do was, at the end of the project, had to present to the legislation or the legislature how much money they thought they have saved in each of the projects. And only then, after that was evaluated, were they able to get more authorization. So it had to show some type of savings. How they demonstrated the savings, I really don't know. And the third point is that, excuse me, the CMGC process, as it's been authorized for us, dictates that we have to come back to you as the governing board 60 days after the project is completed and give you a report of what staff feels went right and went wrong with the CMGC process for your evaluation. And that has to happen for every project. So at the end of this project, you should expect to receive one from us.
I would suggest that in addition to that, we'd like regular updates as we go through the process, just to give us an idea how the process is working, because we may have other projects that will come up during the time of this project, in which case it would be nice to learn from the first one so that the second one is even better. And I hesitate to say anything else because I've got two architects and designers sitting here right next to me. But I will say from sort of osmosis experience, having been married to a general contractor for a very, very long time, who was also a project manager, there were an awful lot of projects that did not have the construction team in on the design end of it, and then things had to be redesigned after it was done. And it would have been a whole lot more helpful if the practicalities had been addressed during the process, rather than having to wait until after the end, which incurs many, many times more cost. So I think this is a great opportunity for us. It's a great opportunity for us as CCTA to show that we can help our member agencies save money on projects and do them more efficiently and get them done with a good bit more local control, which is what we're all about many times. So given that, we have 3 items to approve here. 8.1, any motion?
I would move, excuse me, item 8.1 to authorize the adoption of the CMGC delivery method for the Bollinger Canyon Road overcrossing.
Okay. Motion by Arnrich
Tom, you got to figure it out.
I'll second.
and a second by Butt. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? That carries unanimously. Thank you. 8.2 is the authorization to issue requests for proposals.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Taylor, second by Arnrich. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Item 8.3, issue request for RFP for independent cost estimate services. Motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Butt, second by Arnrich. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Ivan. We will look forward to getting regular updates back to the committee on how this is working, and anything we can do to improve our process. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Super. All right, we will move on to item 9, which is to approve task order number 1 under agreement number 500 with HDR Engineering on the East County Transportation Infrastructure Investment Study. This is an exciting idea. I'm going to reserve the motion on this one for Bob. All right, Hisham?
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Just a little bit background on this item. At the request of Transplan in May, the authority programmed $500,000 in the recently adopted 2019 Measure J strategic plan for the study. The funding really is intended to help East County identify transportation infrastructure projects needed to facilitate the development of the northern waterfront and attract jobs to East County. To do that, we need to look at goods movement, not just in East County, but countywide, so we can understand the origin and destination of those trips. And the study will have two main outcomes. The first one is a goods movement plan for Contra Costa County. The goal here is to help us get more of our roadways on the state or national or federal freight networks. At this time, you probably know only I-80 in the county is on the national freight network. Because of that, only projects on I-80 can compete for freight-related funding, including the SB1 trade corridor category. We know Highway 4 and 680 as well as Byron Highway carry a lot of traffic, so we're going to be looking for ways to include them on both the state and the federal networks. The second outcome is prioritization of projects in East County based on what East County thinks is important. The goal here is to identify the top priority projects and potential fund sources to move them forward. We will be definitely working with Transplan on the study over the next 12 months to get this done. But at this time, we're asking your authorization for the chair to execute Task Order 1 under Agreement 500 with HDR in an amount not to exceed $400,000 and to approve a contingency of $100,000. We have Stephen Decker and Sheena from HDR here. Sitting at the corner there. Stephen will be managing the study for us. And as you know, HDR is next on our on-call list that you approved back in September of this year. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, sir.
Questions?
Yes. Is this going to really take the federal aspect of funds? Isn't this going to, do we need to go lobby somebody? Do we need to, because to get the message across that this would be a need that we need to look at? Because this is a big project in the scope, as I see it. It's not just Brentwood or the East County. This is, when you go countywide, you're talking 1 million people and the accessibility, et cetera.
That's right. We're hoping the study one of the outcomes is to find out what exactly we need to do to include such roadways on the federal or the state networks, or the state is working on a freight mobility plan right now. We want to make sure that we have our top priority projects included in this plan. And luckily, HDR actually is the same consultant who's working on that plan, so that's an advantage to us.
That's why I really wanted to make sure that that they would ensure that that is all in their scope of as you work with this, where we fit in with the feds and how we would approach them, and et cetera, et cetera. I just want to make sure that it's on the record. That's how I see it. Again, it's countywide, and that's huge. Yeah. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, a second by Arnrich. One other question that I would add, I would presume, and Bob's right, that's a dangerous thing to do, but that there would be at least some conversation with Alameda County and perhaps even San Joaquin about the connectivity of those regional routes, because without collaboration with our neighbors, it's pretty hard to make a freight route on Highway 4 that connects to the main regional freight for the state. So I would assume that that's part of what's intended, and I'm seeing nodding heads over on the side from our HDR folks. So just making sure we're not being isolationist here, because that you don't get freight that way.
Question, just
Yeah.
follow up on that. Well, what is the timeline?
The goal is to complete it within 12 months, but the timeline will be fine-tuned as we get into the study. Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. All right, if there are no other questions, we have a motion by Taylor and a second by Arnrich. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? That carries unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Hisham. We're looking forward to updates on this one too, so that'll be good. Next item is correspondence and news clippings. Commissioner and staff comments. I have no comments to report. We do have a CalCog meeting coming up next week, so we'll report on that at the next meeting. Any comments by commissioners? Reports, executive staff? No. Oh, my goodness. Well, unless we have other business, we are adjourned to our next meeting on December 5th. Thank you all.